Greetings, welcome to Cleveland, Ohio. Today, we are in Lakeview Cemetery, and we're going to show you all the remarkable individuals that are buried here and highlight their accomplishments.
First opened in 1869, Lakeview Cemetery has been the area of numerous burials of historically significant individuals. Examples include John D. Rockefeller, Carl B. Stokes, Alan Freed, Ray Chapman, President James A. Garfield, Harvey Bakar, Elliot Ness, among others.
Here in Section 5C, we are standing at the grave of Carl B. Stokes, an American trailblazer in both American politics and civil rights.
Carl B. Stokes was the first African American mayor in a major city of the United States. Raised on the east side of Cleveland, Stokes brought national attention to the city, both during and after his 2 terms as mayor. Examples include his efforts to reform the Cleveland Police Department, his Cleveland Now urban revitalization project, and his advocacy for addressing pollution and additional environmental concerns, following the Cuyahoga River Fire in 1969.
Here in Section 7 of the cemetery lies the grave of Elliot Ness, one of Cleveland's most well-respected law enforcement figures, best known for leading the Untouchables and bringing down Al Capone during the Prohibition era in Chicago.
Known as the leader of the Untouchables, Elliot Ness was a highly renowned law enforcement figure who contributed to some of America's most historic and chilling criminal cases. During his time in Cleveland, Ness served as the city's safety director from 1935 to 1941. As director of safety, Ness led the investigation into the Cleveland Torso murder case. At the time, Cleveland was one of the top 10 most populated cities in the United States. While leading the Untouchables, Ness was an essential contributor toward cracking down on Al Capone's massive criminal empire in Chicago during Prohibition.
Here in Section 7 of Lakeview Cemetery lies Harvey Bakar, a very famous underground comic book artist.
Known as the American Splendor, Harvey Bakar started out as a jazz records critic for the Downbeat Jazz Review. Inspired by the works of Robert Crumb, Bakar created comic strips that pushed the limits of the newly recognized practice. In 1987, the well-established comic strip artist went on to win the American Book Award in 1987, and in 2003, a film titled American Splendor was based off of Bakar's work.
Here in Section 5E of the cemetery lies Alan Freed, a very famous local DJ who was famous for coining the term rock and roll and became a very nationally known figure in the music industry.
Known as Moondog, Alan Freed started off as a college basketball announcer and disc jockey. In the early 1950s, Freed became host of WJW Radio in Cleveland. While in this role, Freed teamed up with Leo Mintz to sponsor a late-night radio show in which blues and rhythm music were prevalent. At one point during their collaboration, the two coined the term rock and roll. In March 1952, Freed went on to host the groundbreaking Moondog Coronation Ball. Throughout the next couple of years, Freed earned a reputation as one of radio's most recognized voices. Amidst his success, Freed put out his record label, End Records.
Here in Section 42 lies the grave of former MLB player and Cleveland Indians player Ray Chapman, whose tragic and unfortunate story is a well-known tale for all baseball fans.
Ray Chapman played for the Cleveland Indians from 1912 to 1920. His main position was shortstop. In 1917, Chapman had his standout season. That year, he achieved a Major League Baseball record of 67 sacrifices while also stealing 55 bases. Chapman was a solid defensive player, leading the league in assists once and putouts twice. During the 1920 season, Chapman tragically lost his life as a result of a hit by pitch to the head. He was 29 years old.
Here in Section 50 lies the grave of Garrett Morgan, who is most famous for inventing the first traffic signal and is also famous for inventing life-saving gas masks for soldiers in WW1. In
1907, Garrett Morgan entered the workforce as a sewing machine repairman and salesman. By 1913, Morgan launched the hair care product company known as G.A. Morgan Hair Refining. In 1912, Morgan introduced what is known as the breathing device. This invention aided in recovery efforts following the Cleveland Waterworks explosion in July of 1916. In 1923, Morgan launched his signature invention, the traffic light. In addition to implementing the red for stop and green for go, Morgan added the yellow for drivers to slow down. Shortly after this accomplishment, Morgan sold his traffic light to General Electric Company for $40,000.
Here in Section 5E lies the grave of famous rock and roll legend and Cleveland legend, Michael Stanley.
Michael Stanley was a homegrown talent who brought a great amount of joy to Clevelanders and rock and roll fans. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Stanley and his band set attendance records at Richfield Coliseum and Blossom Music Center. An 11-time Emmy Award winner, Stanley served as Cleveland's longtime afternoon drive disc jockey. Stanley also made guest appearances on American Bandstand with Dick Clark, The Drew Carey Show, and The Merv Griffin Show.
Here in this mausoleum behind me is the grave of Al Lerner, who was the owner of the Cleveland Browns and the chairman of MBNA.
Former Cleveland Browns owner Al Lerner's accomplishments include buying into Equitable Bank and merging it with MNC Financial, while investing $100 million into MBNA in 1981. Next, in 1986, Lerner purchased 5% of the Cleveland Browns and Cleveland Stadium Corporation. By 1995, Lerner's ownership stake rose to 9%. Then, in 1998, when the Cleveland Browns were about to return to the NFL as an expansion team, Lerner sold his share of the Baltimore Ravens and Stadium Corporation back to Art Modell, the previous owner of the Cleveland Browns. This deal involved an overall payment of $530 million on Lerner's part. At the time, this was a record sum for a professional sports franchise.
Here in this monument behind me lies 20th President of the United States, James Abram Garfield, who was also a hero during the United States Civil War.
Prior to entering politics, James Abram Garfield served as a preacher for the Disciples of Christ. Within this field, Garfield was known for his strong oratorial skills. In 1859, Garfield earned a nomination for the Republican seat in the Ohio Senate, in which he won. As an Ohio senator, Garfield voiced his disfavor of the North compromising with the secession-ready South. Following the outbreak of the American Civil War, Garfield left his Senate position and enlisted in the Union Army, in which he went on to lead the 42nd Ohio Volunteers. Before his discharge, Garfield achieved the rank of colonel. In the 1880 presidential election, the Republican Garfield defeated Democratic candidate Winfield Scott Hancock by just 10,000 popular votes to become the 20th United States President. While in office, President Garfield prioritized civil service reform, fighting corruption, pushing for civil rights, and amplifying the authority of the president. With his civil service corrections, Garfield appointed officials based off of merit as opposed to political affiliation. As for the anti-corruption efforts, Garfield was particularly adamant about addressing issues within the post office. Tragically, on July 2, 1881, President Garfield was shot by an unsuccessful office seeker and lawyer named Charles Guiteau at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C. Garfield initially survived the gunshots, but died 2.5 months later at the age of 49.
Here in Section 9 lies Mark Hanna, one of the most important and influential lawmakers and politicians of the late 19th century.
Early in his career, Mark Hanna claimed ownership of his father's grocery company after the latter passed away. Now in control, Hanna renamed the business the M.A. Hanna Company. In addition, the businessman went on to own Woodland Avenue and West Side Railway. One of Hanna's chief competitors was Tom L. Johnson. Both men strove to be leaders of the streetcar industry. In the late 1880s, Hanna transitioned the Cleveland City Cable Company to the Cleveland City Railway Company. In 1869, Hanna was elected to the Cleveland Board of Education. As a prominent Cleveland Republican, he worked as a political campaigner for Joseph B. Forker's winning gubernatorial campaign in 1885. Plus, Hanna contributed to John Sherman's losing effort to be the Republican presidential nominee in 1888. Sherman would rebound as a successful Senate candidate in 1892. This Senate campaign effort was once again aided by Hanna. Ultimately, Hanna helped orchestrate William McKinley's victorious presidential campaigns in both 1896 and 1900.
Here in Section 10 lies John D. Rockefeller, who was the founder of Standard Oil and was during his lifetime the richest man in the world. Alongside him lies his wife Laura and his mother Eliza, in addition to his other family members.
John D. Rockefeller founded Standard Oil Company in 1870. Throughout his life and career, Rockefeller helped shape Cleveland into a major contributor in the oil business. Along with that, Rockefeller prioritized education and public health within the Cleveland community. Before becoming a world-renowned industrialist, the quote-unquote oil king worked for a Cleveland Commission merchant as an assistant bookkeeper. In 1853, the young Rockefeller moved to the Cleveland suburb of Strongsville. Along with his colleague Maurice B. Clark, Rockefeller set up a commission business, which went on to thrive during the American Civil War. Next, Rockefeller's Standard Oil accomplishments consisted of revolutionizing the petroleum industry, constructing a monopoly via ruthless business practices, such as buying out his competitors and setting up a trust. This contributed toward Standard Oil dominating the American oil market. Some of Rockefeller's philanthropic causes included founding the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Foundation, the latter of which focused on promoting the well-being of mankind.
Here in Section 10 of the cemetery lies the grave of John Hay, who was an American statesman best known for being a personal secretary of Abraham Lincoln and was an ambassador to Great Britain under McKinley, and served as the U.S. Secretary of State twice under Rutherford B. Hayes and James Garfield, and then also served under McKinley and Roosevelt.
Throughout his life, John Milton Hay had the following occupations: diplomat, historian, statesman, and United States Secretary of State. An 1858 graduate of Brown University, Hay was appointed Abraham Lincoln's private secretary in 1861 at the age of 22. Also, Hay escorted Lincoln during the latter's famous train ride from Springfield, Illinois to Washington, D.C. From 1865 to 1870, Hay served as Secretary of Legations in Paris, France, Vienna, Austria, and Madrid, Spain. Upon coming back to the United States, Hay went on to work for the New York Tribune. Following that, Hay moved to Cleveland, where he lived until 1886. While in Cleveland, Hay worked on civic and cultural boards. In 1890, Hay, in collaboration with John Nicolay, worked on a 10-volume writing titled Abraham Lincoln, A History. In 1896, Hay contributed to William McKinley's presidential campaign. The following year, Hay earned the Ambassador for Great Britain position. Lastly, in 1898, Hay became the U.S. Secretary of State, a position he worked under President McKinley and President Theodore Roosevelt.